Welcome to the June 25th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I will call the meeting to order and begin by establishing a quorum. But before I do that, let me read the opportunities for the public to access and participate in the hybrid meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website, on the Planning Commission homepage, and on the Albemarle County calendar. Participation will include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received. So with that, Caroline, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Missile,
Here.
Ms. Firehawk,
Here.
Mr. Bivens.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, having established a quorum, I will open it up for matters not listed on the agenda from the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak to matters not listed on the agenda?
I don't hear what I have.
All right, here's not. So with that, we will move on to the work session. ZTA 2022-2 zoning modernization phase 1 wrap up. Turn it over to staff. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Let me get this computer plugged in. In the meantime, I am Leah Brumfield, zoning planner, and I am also joined by Rebecca from the Berkeley Group.
Rebecca, you are currently Michael Barnes, by the way.
Isn't that pretty?
And we will be reviewing the articles drafted in phase 1 of the zoning modernization project, all of which have been reviewed by the commission previously. And with that, I will let Rebecca lead us in.
Yes, our agenda tonight starts with an overview of the project goals and our work on this phase of the zoning modernization project to date. Leah will move into our article review by highlighting some of the more general edits that were conducted throughout all of the phase 1 articles. And then we'll dive into the significant changes that we're proposing for each of the articles. After that, we will talk about our stakeholder input from the drafted articles. And then finally, we'll talk about the next steps in phase 1, briefly discuss phase 2 of the project, and answer any questions the commission has. So as a reminder, we began this project in August of 2022. The goals of the zoning ordinance modernization project are to provide a streamlined and user-friendly regulations, incorporate best practices and Code of Virginia requirements, address goals and strategies from the comprehensive plan, and consider community needs and issues. A graphic depiction of our phase 1 work shows that we began in the fall of 2022 with our investigation work. We conducted interviews with staff, with each PC member, and with local development and building stakeholders. We presented our findings from those interviews and our diagnostic of the ordinance text in December 2022. The first 2 articles, Articles 1 and 2, were presented to you in March 2023. We continued with refinement of those 2 articles and drafting of Articles 3 and 10. In March of this year, you reviewed and provided feedback for Articles 3 and 10. Now we're in the investigation phase of the final revisions. We have conducted stakeholder interviews and edited the text based on all feedback, which includes the stakeholders, staff, and yourselves. As a reminder, while the graphic says final revisions, this should be interpreted as final revisions during this phase. This is a multi-phase project, and the last phase includes a collective look and modification of all text as needed prior to public hearings. So this is a short bulleted version of our progress. I won't go through all of that in detail again, but I'll just note and draw your attention that you've had 3 work sessions on this during this phase 1, as well as we've had 3 sessions with what I'll say is external engagement. This could be general public and then also identified stakeholders. Tonight's meeting will focus on a second review of the drafted articles for Phase 1. After this session, the drafted articles will be presented to the Board of Supervisors. The feedback we want to obtain tonight includes, are the articles logical and are the points clear? We will now start the review of the articles. I want to make one important point. As we talk about the different articles, we will be using article numbers for the new proposed ordinance. So to clarify, for example, Article 3 in your current ordinance is definitions, but Article 3 of the proposed ordinance covers applications and permits. Each of the proposed articles are included in attachments 1A through 1D. Additionally, a crosswalk is provided in attachment 1E. This crosswalk outlines each section of the existing ordinance with its new proposed location. If there are regulations in the existing ordinance that you want to compare to the proposed regulations, this crosswalk will direct you to the location of that text. An example on the screen, Article 2, Section 6 of the current ordinance contains regulations for nonconformities. If you wanted to compare 6.2, which is nonconforming uses, you would follow that row across to the column that says new draft section number and see it's now located in Section 10.2.1, which means it's in Article 10, Division 2, and Section 1. You can see that we've supplied a note that says we've streamlined the text because it is directed from Virginia code and does not need to be repeated within the proposed ordinance. So that should just help you with any orienting to existing language. And now I'll hand it over to Leah.
Could I ask a really simple question about the crosswalk, just from the standpoint of applicants? Will that carry into any final versions as a reference point for them, or is that really just during the process, it's for us to review?
That's for our internal use to help us
Yeah.
keep track of where things are and how much it's changed over time.
Okay.
It might be something that you could, choose to make available as a supplementary document, but right now the plans are just for internal use.
Yeah, just a thought. If people are used to dealing with the code or working with the code and, the ordinance, it might be interesting to have a simplified version of a crosswalk in the final version that they could reference. Just a thought. Because it was very helpful, I thought.
Well, thank you. And going into the actual ordinance draft text, as we have mentioned, Phase 1 of the zoning auto modernization project has covered the 4 articles, comprising of mostly foundational and procedural ordinance text. These 4 articles have all been reviewed by the commission previously, and we have discussed them in work sessions. And following those work sessions, staff in the Berkeley group incorporated the specific feedback and focused on the general guidelines that we received, and that we incorporated into our drafting guidelines, specifically avoiding jargon, writing a more brief code, and removing unnecessary state code from the ordinance text. Additionally, we have had staff subject matter experts. Oh, no. Had a pop-up. Staff subject matter experts and the county attorney reviewing the drafts to ensure accuracy, user friendliness, and Virginia code compliance. So Article 1 lays the legal foundation for the ordinance. It includes references to enabling legislation for creation of the ordinance and the zoning map, and describes the overall purpose and goals of the zoning ordinance. This section was also Section 1 of our current ordinance in Article 1. The majority of the changes from the old language are clarifications and shortening unnecessary legalistic language and replacing quotations of Virginia code with references to Virginia code. And as an example, this slide shows the currently adopted zoning ordinance purpose statement, which describes that the purposes of the chapter are as enabled by state legislation, promoting public health, safety, convenience, and welfare. And then we have a long list of objectives that are pulled almost verbatim from Virginia code. As the county does not have the authority to change state law, we cannot change this list. And so having this list in our ordinance does not accomplish any additional purpose. Instead, the new draft quotes only the foundational ideas, which is promoting public health, safety, convenience, and welfare of the community. And then it references the Virginia Code 15.2-2202 and 15.2-2283. Moving on to Article 2, it's again a very fundamental foundational section. It covers instructions for interpreting the ordinance. It enables the zoning administrator to interpret and enforce the ordinance. It creates the allowances of the Board of Zoning Appeals and enacts references to the Architectural Review Board. And it references Chapter 2, where we have outlined the overall goals and duties of the Planning Commission. Again, the majority of the changes in this article are removing quoted state code, providing direct links to the state code sections. All of those references will be live links within Unicode, the same way they are now. And then also we are clarifying the agent's powers and duties. The agent in this situation is the zoning administrator. And clarifying and codifying some of the Architectural Review Board's powers and duties, as they were previously a little bit inaccurately worded and a little bit confusing. So bringing that up on this screen, the current text for the powers and duties of the ARB includes language about promulgating design guidelines, which is confusing and as interpreted directly is not actually accurate for the ARB's role in creating design guidelines. What they actually are enabled to do and what their actual role is to recommend guidelines for the Board of Supervisors to adopt, as shown in this proposed language. Additionally, we have worked with ARB staff to describe the full role of the Architectural Review Board here, where they also review applications for site plans or any legislative applications within the entrance corridor, regardless of whether a certificate of appropriateness is required. They give general recommendations for those, and they do not issue a certificate of appropriateness. That is one of their roles. That is one of the things that they do. And we wanted to include that in this new ordinance. We have worked very closely with ARB staff on these descriptions and with the subject matter staff for each of these kinds of sections in the roles that these boards and commissions play in the ordinance and in the county. So we're very pleased that the new draft captures a much clearer picture of the full role and actually codifies the things that are happening on the ground right now. Moving to Article 3, we go beyond the foundational. We begin to outline process. We're looking to create a much more user-friendly and descriptive picture of the medley of applications and permits that we process. Currently, the ordinance language describing these processes is either scattered throughout various sections of the ordinance, or it may be omitted entirely. So we're excited to have it all in one place. A few of the notable changes include renaming zoning clearances as zoning permits. We have described previously, but where the ordinance currently references zoning permits, it only refers to setback permits, where a building does not require a review of its use, and it may or may not require a building permit, but it does still need to meet setbacks. Two primary examples of this are farm buildings and a largish shed. So we've widened the umbrella of zoning permits to be defining of all of the zoning clearances we process, including the setback only permits, commercial zoning clearances, home occupations, homestays, and other zoning led actual zoning permits. In addition to those clarifications, the overall reduction in verbosity, removal of Virginia State Code quotations that we have mentioned before. We again worked with ARB staff to remove unnecessary language regarding certificates of appropriateness. One of the substantive changes here was removing the default approval of a certificate of appropriateness after a set period of inaction by the Architectural Review Board. The current procedure is for either staff or the ARB to do a full review of an application for certificate of appropriateness, usually within 30 days after submission, sometimes up to 60, and send the applicant either an approval or a request for changes. Currently, If the application is not reviewed and an action is not sent to the applicant within 60 days, the applicant may request a final decision. And if they hear nothing within an additional 21 days, the certificate of appropriateness is automatically approved, similar to a reference of something to the Planning Commission, which you're familiar with. In discussions with ARB staff, we discovered this provision is obsolete and has not been enacted in living memory. And at the county attorney's advice to not impose unnecessary constraints on county bodies or staff, we have removed that provision where it was just cluttering up the ordinance previously. It's also not specifically required by Virginia code, unlike the Planning Commission automatic recommendation of approval. So in another section, we have codified the practice of declaring inactive applications withdrawn. We are hoping to remove stale applications from review timelines, and we want to keep applications moving so that things are actually being built, and we are processing applications under the guidelines that apply at the time that they are being built. As long as application is being progressed upon, as long as there are changes and there are drafts, there's communication, it will not be deemed voluntarily withdrawn. But under the proposed draft ordinance, if staff reach out to an applicant for additional clarifications, an additional agency approval, or if they request changes and they hear nothing for 6 months, the application is deemed voluntarily withdrawn. This will greatly aid staff in moving applications through the process and avoid submissions being sent in that are just placeholders where an application is not actually ready for review, but the applicant wants to get it on the page as being submitted at that time. So that really, those kinds of applications really bog down staff review time, and they really eat up a lot of county resources in a way that's not productive and does not help the community. So again, looking at this intimidating list, it is best practice to move non-mandatory requirements for applications out of the ordinance and into forms and documents. This list here is just a snippet of the legislative applications requirements that are currently in the ordinance. It continues for probably another 2 or 3 slides. We are moving these requirements out of the ordinance itself and into checklists and into the enterprise permitting and licensing system, which I will talk about on the next slide. Here we go. Our new community development system, enterprise permitting and licensing, EPNL as we're calling it, is a replacement of our county view system where we track and process applications. It also has a forward customer facing side, which you can see a snapshot of here on this screen. The applicant portal that we're looking at here walks the applicant through the process of submitting an application. Each question must be answered. Each required item must be uploaded. So an applicant cannot submit a wildly incomplete application. So we are going to be requiring that list. It will just be submitted here, and it will be provided in the pre-application meetings as it currently already is. So any items that are not wholly mandatory for each and every application, and some things which may change over time, it is best practice for these things to live outside of the ordinance. So we have flexibility and we can be a little bit more nimble with that. We do want to reassure the commission that all of these requirements will not be swept away. Anything necessary will not be disappearing. We're just changing where it lives from the ordinance to outside of the ordinance. And finally, we do want to highlight the lovely process diagrams we've included in the applications process. In Article 3 of this draft ordinance, these illustrations are meant to guide an applicant through the basic process of applying for and following the review of each application type. Here we have the diagrams for certificates of appropriateness and special use permits. And as you can see, the gold colored actions are the applicant's actions. The navy blue actions are staff. The maroon is Architectural Review Board. Purple is the Planning Commission, and the teal is Board of Supervisor actions. This provides a very clear visual language and allows for an at-a-glance basic understanding of the application process, which is overall working to make the ordinance easier to follow, more user-friendly, and simpler to administer. So our last article today is Article 10, which covers nonconformities. As we have noted in all the other ordinance drafts, we'll replace language quoting Virginia Code, references to the Virginia Code sections instead. And we also made a few additional changes, including updating the language regarding the expansion of nonconforming quarries and cemeteries. So the expansion of nonconforming quarries and cemeteries is frozen on the date that this particular ordinance was previously adopted, June 14, 2000. Any parcels that it is expanded to must be under identical ownership as of that date. So following the completion of the first full drafts of these, we presented the drafts to the Charlottesville Area Development Roundtable and the Blue Ridge Home Builders Association, Cadre, and BRHBA. Their feedback was very positive. They primarily expressed interest in furthering simplification of language, and they did make a few regulation-specific requests that we will be considering later on in the process when we get to the community design guidelines and the supplementary regulations. So we've also added a feedback link on our Engage website, and we will be accepting feedback from any community member at any time throughout the process. If there's just something that pops up in somebody's head, they read something they want to give feedback on, they are free to submit on that page. And speaking of future phases, next steps for this project on this phase will be addressing any comments we received tonight and then presenting the drafted articles to the Board of Supervisors. We're currently scheduled for the second meeting in August. As noted previously, the board will not be adopting the ordinance until the entire ordinance is drafted. We do need to update references as we go along, and changes in one section may have implications to other changes that are already drafted. So our future phases will rely heavily on community feedback. We are working with the comprehensive plan team, AC 44. We are trying to share all the community input that we get. We are collaborating on the goals and the action steps that are going into the comprehensive plan, because we're trying to create a zoning ordinance that really reflects what is in the comprehensive plan so that we can achieve those visions in the actual community. So as we are moving forward with the AC 44 team, we will be reflecting the updates on their side into phase 2. So we will be determining which phase will be moving forward along with the comprehensive plan team. So we will update the planning commission on that when we get that, hopefully in the next 2 months or so. So we would welcome any feedback on the 2 questions we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. One, is the framework and organization of the draft logical and comprehensible? We are hoping the answer is yes. And 2, are any ordinance points, any requirements, any regulations unclear? Do you need additional definitions or clarifications on any of those? So that concludes staff presentation, and we will.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
That was very helpful. Thank you both. So can I ask a couple of just quick overview questions before we get into individual questions? One is a very basic question that I probably should know the answer to, but remind me why we are, I don't know if the word skipped is right, but 4 through 9, Articles 4 through 9. How do they relate to the work that we're doing? Are they coming in the future or how? Okay.
They will be in future phases. Articles 4 through 9 are going to be about the districts, about the uses. And so we need to lean on that comprehensive plan information to be able to
Got
develop
it.
those. So we went to these first,
Yep,
allowing the comprehensive plan to move along, and then we'll be taking those in chunks as well.
perfect. Thank you. And I assume as you went through the ARB sections of this, you received ARB input from Margaret and so on. That's all crafted in there. Okay, and I had a few specific questions, but before I do that, I will open it up to the group to answer question number 1. Where should I start? Commissioner Bivens? Thoughts?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. That, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know whether or not I'm just becoming much more sort of submerged in all of this, but it was actually, this trip down this work was actually fun. And so, yeah, turn around, Michael. Look in that direction over there. And so I sent a bunch of things, comments to staff that I don't need to go over
Okay.
again, and they can either respond to it or not respond to it as you seem fit. But I will say that, you know, you all aren't there yet, but for those eyes over 60s, this is really a wonderful way to be able to read a document. You know,
Yeah,
having lived in Virginia code at the sort of minute point size that the Virginia code is, this was so refreshing. And so I want to thank you for taking the time. I know that sometimes it's a pain. Thank you for the time that it took to sort of just format it this way. And I've sent a bunch of stuff forward. What I will say, Chair, and I don't know how we do this, that the discussion of the nexus between what they're working on zoning and what might be expected through the AC 44 was really quite helpful.
yeah,
And so to the extent that the public can hear
yeah.
your sort of spiel on that, I think will help people to sort of put in context the
Mhm.
nexus and the joining of these two processes.
Agreed.
So that they're not sort of saying, why are they doing it? Why are they? I thought what you said tonight was really very quite helpful. So you get a 10.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I actually, and maybe this exists, but I actually started thinking graphically, like in my brain, like how do we show that in terms of timeline relative to the two efforts, the ordinance and the comp plan? Because I think that's a helpful clarification for the community.
We have discussed kind of a mapping of that. And I think that as we get, well, mostly for our own use internally to understand that as staff, we have discussed about mapping the different sections of the comp plan and how they will
Mm.
translate into the ordinance. And some sections of the comprehensive plan don't necessarily make it into the ordinance because they are future goals.
Sure, yeah.
They're very visionary. There's something that
Yeah.
that we are trying to encourage
Right.
through our actions, but we can't mandate. But that is something that might be useful for the adoption phase, I think,
Mhm.
especially for people to understand. And also if you don't mind, just kind of to Commissioner Bivens' point, we are finding this a very helpful process to work with the comprehensive plan team so that they're not trying to suggest things that are not legally possible under
Yeah, right.
Virginia state law. And then we can kind of push the zoning ordinance towards that vision a little bit and try to achieve some of the goals that we've set out, because we want to have big goals. We
Mhm.
want to have achievable goals.
Mhm.
So we're really trying to make that perfect balance there, and make two pieces of ordinance that are gonna really kind of play off of each other and push each other forward.
Awesome. Thank
I had
you.
a follow-up question on that
Yeah.
sort of process thing. Well, actually, first of all, just thank you for the writing. It's visually clear as Commissioner Bivens pointed out, but also I was just thinking about like when I teach my students how to write for radio or write for podcast, you take a lot of information and you really kind of consolidate it down so that people can hear it once and it'll stick. And I feel like this. Yeah, it's like instead of a block of 300 words, we've got 70 and it's great. So thank you for all that. But also this, as far as the process goes, what happens in the next phases? I think was 4 phase here?
So we are in phase one right now. Have 4 drafting phases and 1 adoption phase. So as Rebecca mentioned, we do not have the process mapped out, which phase we're going to get to next. The other phases, depending on what order they come into, are going to be districts, uses and their guidelines. So the things that regulate the uses, um, family day homes must have these approvals from these state agencies. And the community guidelines. So things like requiring street trees, things that go into your site plan requirements for blocks, for your, not your setbacks, that's going to be in districts. But
Lighting, signs,
Mhm.
all the community feel aspects are in the design.
Are there any phases coming down the pike where we see zoning map changes to align with some of the overlay districts around density and otherwise?
so that's going to be a big question. And if that does happen, it would be in the districts phase.
Okay.
That is something that is up in the air. That could definitely happen. It depends on how drastic the district rewriting ends up going.
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly thinking about that as we look at the word modernization. So yes, in terms of making the language very readable in plain English, does a fantastic job. In terms of modernizing zoning to address the problems of today instead of 1980, I'm not entirely sure we get there. And I'd like to have us actually look at some of the substance of that, in future phases.
Great.
Um,
Good comments.
Can I extend on
Yeah.
that question? So there have been TMAs and tax text amendments and zoning map amendments over this period. Are those, is the GIS map corrected or modified when those happen? So the map that we see online reflects what the supervisors and what we've passed there. Okay, so the question that I think that Commissioner Moore is speaking to is that as we wrestle with what Commissioner, I can't call him Lonnie, Commissioner Lonnie has wrestled with the whole idea of doing thinking more specifically about the rural part of the county. And should there be a specific sort of, or an additional breakdown in the county to accommodate different, and I know I don't care if I get yelled at, but to accommodate commerce in those places, not country stores, but sort of rural-based businesses that might arrive with a different kind of zoning approach to it.
Yeah, and I think I could add a little bit more on that too. We have different uses that already exist. It's not even an issue of like adding uses or changing uses, but acknowledging the differences in uses and qualities of the rural area as they exist. We have areas that are large quality habitat, large forest blocks. We know that we have biodiversity in those areas. We should acknowledge them in our maps. We know that we have areas that are being used by agriculture that are important to agriculture because they're in prime soils and whatnot. Those should be recognized on the maps. And so it's really more about making the maps represent the fact that the rural area is not homogeneous the way it's currently depicted in terms of our comprehensive plan designations in the rural area. So that would be one thing. But I did want to go back to removing a bunch of items out into checklists and forms, which I generally support. I think that's a good idea. However, as people come before the planning commission, a lot of, when we have rezonings or, other projects coming before, special use permits, I think one of the big concerns from the public do concern with, the design guidelines and the finer details, and having the public more engaged in what goes into a checklist really, I think is advantageous for us and the community. So I would encourage us to find ways, or I'd love to know from staff, like, how are we going to make those checklists more visible and provide more engagement into those kinds of checklists as they're revised, so that by the time the public does show up for a hearing, that they know what the requirements are and they're supportive of what those requirements may be.
I would say, a couple of things. They're going to be engaging in a preliminary meeting with staff where staff says, here's your checklist. And then they're going to be engaging online to fill out that application and actually submit that application. And online, as Leah mentioned earlier, it's going to be a system that they can't progress further until they have provided X, Y, and Z. They can't, skip items and those types of things. So they will be fully aware of what's required before they, stand at the dais before you.
Oh, let me provide a little bit of clarity. So I'm not talking about the applicant themselves. While that's very good too, the applicant should have clarity as to what the guidelines are and checklists. But I think it's important for, the neighbors surrounding that project, the people that might show up to either support or oppose, something, to know what those requirements are as well. And so the danger of taking those checklists, if we put them in too obscure of a location, we're leaving the public out of one of the most important pieces, I think, of that process.
I think the intent is basically to have a good application section that's gathering your general information. Who are you? What are you trying to do? The backside of that's going to have all the things that you're required. I would envision that way, being very well spelled out. And so if you're an applicant, obviously it's there. And if you're somebody in the general public, I mean, the application itself, I think, would be the vehicle to give you all the information. So you'd find it in one spot. You wouldn't have to really look for it if that was the concern that you were expressing.
And so what will the revision process be like when there are changes to the checklist? Will continue to be public hearings, or how would the public be engaged when those requirements are changed?
Part of the advantage is the flexibility for staff to be able to make this change.
So if I understand, I'm not hearing staff say that they're going to change the requirements.
Mhm.
What I hear staff saying is that requirements are going to be crafted and held in a way that the applicant can, as he or she is going through the process, will know what the requirements are. So they're not changing the context of what's required of them. Those are the things that have to either go, I don't think there's an administrative process for that. I think when that kind of change occurs, that kind of change to the built environment and to what's required during the formation, or as we march to the built environment, has to be approved by the supervisors. So there's a public there's a public way in which the community would be able to weigh in on that. What would be different, instead of having that all in all the various places, but that the application, whatever you call it, the EDP.
Enterprise, community, and
Yeah,
licensing.
thank you, that thing. That piece of software brings all of those various elements in to the application process, but it doesn't change any of those elements.
So I'm wondering if that is actually true, because so what I'm hearing though is that if we're removing these things out of the code and we're putting them in separate documents, then what I'm hearing from staff as a feature of this is they wouldn't have to go through public hearings if they were to change some of these elements. And I would say that means that there wouldn't be public hearings and engagement on those requirements, but I welcome clarity from staff.
Yes, if I can explain to the chair, the kinds of requirements that are on there are not necessarily items that should have ever been for public hearing. These are things like the street tree distribution. We don't necessarily want a public hearing on how many street trees need to be on a block, because that is something that the experts should really be working on and that staff should be working with to make sure that it is both buildable and also meets community goals. One of the things that I've used as an example for these kinds of lists is a future potential requirement for electric charging in all parking spaces. We don't need a public hearing for that. That's really not something that is on the legislative side. That's really on the site plan side. And we want to be able to say, oh, well, you're a parking lot, but you're a
Yeah, I know what she's.
vintage import automobile repair shop. You don't need electric chargers on this piece of property. It's kind of allowing us the flexibility by removing it from the ordinance. And we can change that as we go along. The sections that we're looking at, that long list of legislative application requirements, that was something that is in the ordinance right now and is on the back of each pre-application checklist that staff hands out. So that doesn't change. When it does change, it is something that is currently intended to be a staff decision. It's saying, well, this is a modification to an existing site plan. The only thing you're doing is adding a large playground. We don't need an additional floodplain review on this. We don't need a water protection plan for completely permeable surface
Right.
that is a grass-built playground area, even though that is on the site plan. And that is something that would be a potential amendment to a special use permit because that has to be reflected on the conceptual plan. So this is really things that are on the site plan review level and things that staff are trained to look for, that staff needs to make judgment calls on, and that looking at as a community, we are trying as staff to reflect those goals that are stated in the ordinance and to reflect the goals that are stated in the comprehensive plan. And then we are going to be interpreting that to make sure that that is correct and approved on the applications that we're seeing.
Karen, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna kind of untangle this a little bit. So I think that what Lonnie's looking for is just some place that the public can go and just see what are the things that are required of the applicant. Because the way that the new portal would be set up is you're the applicant and you're going through and now you're checking this box and now you're seeing this next list of things. Just some place on the website that they could see, oh, this is what they're being judged against. Because we get that a lot, like how are they evaluating that or what's required? I totally understand about taking some of these kind of things out of the code. It is best practice. I know that because and I'm sorry you used the example of number of trees per block because that got me all excited, as you would know. But you probably would want to say the number of street trees per block in general that you require. The list of the species of trees would be an example of something that wouldn't be in the code because new cultivars become available. This tree we thought grew great along pavement turns out to die next to the parking lot. So we need to take that species out. So those are the things that become a list that's separate. So I think that you can honor what Lonnie is after. There may be some concern on his part because of what happened with the stream buffer ordinance where it got changed and to its detriment, it got weakened and no one seems to know exactly how, and we vaguely know when, but I think that's what some of the reticence is. So that will be a push-pull of what belongs in the code and what is better left as a list that can be changed, because it is quite onerous to take if we had everything in the code and then you needed to make a change for a good scientific or technical reason, and you'd have to wait for a public hearing and the board and, 8 months later, we got to fix it, so it provides the staff with the flexibility, but I think we could provide the lists that he's talking about because the citizens are always asking us, well, how do they, just, so it wouldn't look like the applicant's portal. Anyway,
Yeah, just to add one time thing to that too. I think there's also, because there wouldn't be public hearings and so forth, a lot of those items that were mentioned would be appropriate for citizen advisory groups, for example, to weigh in on. And I think that making sure that's part of your process, if you have a relevant citizen advisory group for something like trees, we should have a tree commission. For example, or you're revising native plant lists, it would make sense to run it by the Natural Heritage Committee or other people that know something, or, landscape, put together a team of citizen experts that can actually weigh in on that topic. So that there continues to be citizen engagement, whether or not there is a public hearing, because we're a community that's full of experts on a lot of different topics. And we can't expect staff to be experts on everything.
Can I ask just a question from the sort of applicant facing side of things? Am I correct in what I'm hearing? This EC&L will be the portal that we'll use as an applicant to apply for fill in the blank, right?
Enterprise licensing, permitting and licensing, it is the portal that you will use for any application.
Got it.
And then you can review the process of the reviews and any necessary comments or feedback from staff within that portal. And it will have automated alerts and emails with that kind of thing for the applicant to make it easier for them as well.
Kind of like County View with a little bit of extra bells and whistles, right?
Bells, whistles, orchestra.
Yeah, the whole
yeah,
nine
so
yards.
the
Okay.
applicant could anytime look and see where they are in this process, right?
Yeah. And so the checklist that's on there that you would follow, and there are currently obviously checklists, but this would replace those checklists. And those are subject to change is what you're saying.
They are currently subject to change. The checklists that are on the back of the pre-application
Yep.
process, that is something that does get edited right now. It does largely reflect what's in the ordinance, but as we have needed to specify things or
Yep.
explain something, it is not
Yeah.
verbatim the checklist that is in the ordinance today.
Which is actually helpful to the applicant too. And you learn as you go. So it's a good process. Yeah. Okay, great. So I just want to get us back to these questions. We kind of have been answering them in general, but any framework questions before we get on to any specific points or regulations that are unclear? General framework questions.
No, I thought it was clear.
Okay, great. I just had one. So Article 3, I was just curious, and this may be because of the code or something that I'm missing, but Article 3, the order of that, my logic, my internal brain says, why is the certificate of appropriateness first and zoning text amendment last? It seems like if you put it in the order of how they might appear, you would start with zoning text amendments, then you'd have site plans, then you'd have certificates of appropriateness, then you'd have administrative and enforcement. I don't know if those can be reformatted or if that makes any sense to anyone else, but it goes from sort of general to more specific and actionable.
Specific, okay.
Can you clarify the section number on there?
What page?
Yeah, section 30, 31, 32, and 33, Articles 3, permits and application. So if I were king for a day, I would reorder it to be section 33 first, section 32 second, section 30 third, and section 31 last.
I have section 3. I don't think we have a section 30.
No, I'm looking at, I'm sorry, it's Article 3.
Article 3, and then it should be section 3 point something.
Okay, I'm looking at sorry, not to throw the consultant under the bus, but I'm looking at the memo, work session number 4 memo, and I just scroll down to the outline, which is on page 4 of 5. So I apologize if I'm not using the right.
That is where we're pulling that section from.
Okay,
So the current ordinance, certificates of appropriateness are in section 30, which covers overlay districts. And then 31 is our current administration and enforcement. 32 is site plans.
yeah, I see that. I'm just wondering, unless I'm missing something, it seems like. And then section 33 is zoning text amendments, right?
Yes. So that's what's in the current ordinance right now, and that's moving into Article 3.
Oh, got it. Okay, so the numbers that I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers then I can find them.
So currently in Article 3, it gives general housekeeping items that applies to all permits. And then it talks through zoning text amendments, then zoning map amendments, then conditional zoning and proffers, special use permits.
I got you.
Say it. Do you see
Yep,
it?
yep. Okay, so that,
variances. So I think it follows that, and then you get into
it
site
does.
plans.
Thank you.
So there is that sort of hierarchy.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. And then building permits and certificates of
that?
occupancy. And then appeals. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's much better. That's great. Thank you. That was the only non-question I really had for the framework. Turned out to be a
That
non-question.
was that was your
Uh,
framework?
That was my
your
framework
Okay.
question. Anything on points or regulations that are unclear to anyone?
Had a diagram.
Yeah, diagram, go for it.
I like the infographics. I love infographics, but I would like a improvement to be made to the two infographics on page 12, section. Well, I'm doing this backwards. All right, page 8, 3.3.3 and Article 3, that diagram. And then
3.3.
Article 3, page 12, section 3.5.3. So basically, those are the diagrams that list, the process, the applicant comes, the staff reviews, then they have a community meeting, then they go to any revisions and resubmittal, blah, 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 planning commission, blah, blah, blah. What I would like, if you could maybe just go back to that slide. You have it in your slide deck. You have, you guys were showing, here's an example. Yeah. Yeah. So you could look to the one on the right. I get this question a lot, so it's not just me. The public asks, well, what if I didn't go to the community meeting? Where's the just John Q. Public in this diagram? And I know you're trying to simplify it. I know what an infographic is, but I think you could still have like another bubble, like, where you have general public input going to the staff, so that I can point to this and say, this is, you can give your comment to the staff about this application. Cause they do, like Andy Herrick or anybody could tell you all throughout, John, Sarah and Fred are sending comments and then the staff's getting them, and they're adding them to the record in addition to the community meeting. That becomes the package of comments to the applicant. And then the applicant, does what they do with them and then incorporates them as they feel appropriate and moves on to the application. So I know it's just and I'm sorry I didn't come up with a new diagram for you, but one more bubble would make me happy. And I think I would be able to show the public, yes, you have a bubble.
You mean like a step within the process where the public would have a chance to make comments?
Well, they do have a chance to make
Well,
comments. I'm
like-
just saying in this diagram, it looks like they just go to the community meeting and that's it.
As opposed to like highlighting the public
Like
hearing.
at any time, they can comment, they can comment online, they can phone staff, they can, there's many ways they can get their comments in. So just the fact that comments can be received from the public and they are into the process.
I mean, our phone lines are always open.
Right, but I'm just saying this diagram, if I'm the public and I'm looking at this, the only place I see is community meeting.
I would primarily, in that situation, I would primarily tell the public that is what the public hearing is for.
This one, the purple one?
Yeah,
and
the
green
purple
one,
and then
one,
the teal,
and the
yeah.
one?
So that, and then, and anywhere in there, I mean, those are really the public engagement. That's the primary.
I guess, I mean, you
Maybe
don't-
there's a way, yeah, maybe there's a way to add that as a note and an
Or
asterisk
something.
or something that says
just really-
public input welcome
Right,
during the
because
process.
again, I also get that, like, I can't come to the public hearing. I'm 90 years old. Is there, and again, I just think it would be helpful to show that comments can come from outside into this process. I mean, at a certain point, we're not taking those comments anymore, right? Like the Board of Supervisors is done, but just,
Could just add an asterisk
Just
after
something.
community meeting and essentially. say,
yeah, community meeting
somewhere
asterisks, public can
ongoing.
comment it, directly
Public
to the
comment.
staff. Or the planning commission or the board, whatever, just,
We will definitely try to make,
I think there's a-
that clear
Let's
and
drop- let's drop an asterisk.
figure
Yeah.
out
Let's drop an asterisk.
how to clarify that these are. The flow charts here are primarily intended for use for the applicant.
Well, the applicant needs to know that, that
Yeah.
staff are, because I get that from the applicants too. They're like, people are telling me they're sending comments to the staff. Am I going to get those comments?
Well, there are also, if you think about it, it's almost like you have to map all this because there are other opportunities for public input where the public is notified of those
Mm-hmm.
via letter for an adjoining property owner or something like that, where it says you can continue to provide. So, but in this case, it's not shown.
Yeah,
It's just,
so
it looks like it's just a community meeting.
It looks
and
like it's
then
just a
two
community
public
meeting.
hearings.
Like I said, I do get this question in real life. So you just put an asterisk, like you said, at community meeting and maybe the planning commission, maybe the board, and just you can comment to the staff at any time during this process kind of thing.
We did have an original draft of this
Yeah.
that included all of the public notification opportunities,
Yeah.
and there were 20 steps.
Yeah, no, I saw an earlier diagram of the planning process that I got from county staff to share with my students, and it was like an endless flow chart. And I was like, I'm not going to show them that because it was too much.
It is accurate,
So,
but
yeah.
but yeah, this is really more the simplified snapshot, like,
I think there's a way to.
Yeah, we don't have to
Yeah.
belabor the point. I
Yeah,
think
we
y'all
can go to
can
the
come
next
up
one.
with something.
Did you have other things on your list?
That's it. That really was just fixated on that because that's the question I most get.
Awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Bivens? Yes, sir.
So I have one thing that I'm just gonna bring up because everybody knows that I love proffers.
I got that
And
on my list, too.
so, and I just when I get off the planning commission one of these days, I just want the ability to be able to put our own proffers in. I want the planning commission proffer. I guess I'll have to get elected to Richmond to be able to get
You
that
have to go
done.
to
I have to go to.
Comments
legislature.
like that will get you off the planning commission pretty quickly.
It will? Oh, good. Well, let me keep saying that then. So there was this one piece that I mentioned in my notes today in Article 1, Section 1.2.1.5 on page 2, it says there that proffers have the ability they just become it once they're there. And then when we get further into the document, it says that proffers are in addition to, that they sit in tandem with
Mhm.
the existing code. And I just want to have, and I see her nodding, that they really sit in tandem with the code. They don't, as is mentioned on Article 1, they don't actually trump the code. So proffers don't trump the code.
so it does depend on, please, Mr. Herrick, at any time, correct me if I misspoke. But it does depend on what the proffer is. The district regulations may say that you can have a car wash, and you may proffer out that you cannot have a car wash. In that situation, the proffer trumps the district regulations.
Right.
That's a different, so I would say that they're opting it out. So it's not this Trump thing. They're actually opting out of a condition that.
Right, because they proffer, hey, this zoning
Yeah,
class has
Yeah.
these
I'm
many
taking it out,
uses,
yeah.
and we're gonna proffer, we're only gonna
So
do
you
two of them.
But that's not trumping the code. That's exempting.
That's
The
pulling
way I
it,
look
yeah.
at,
They're-
that's pulling it out.
They're proffering not to do something.
Yeah,
In other words, you can't add a use
right,
via proffer.
right. And that's what I was seeing
That's what you felt like it was saying.
yeah, and that's
So
what I
I
was
think-
seeing in Article 3, that Article 3 saying that you sit in your companion to the code, but you never can actually exceed the code.
Hmm.
So I can't add a use. I can remove uses, but I
Right.
can't add uses.
And Commissioner Bivens, I will say that section 1.2.1 subsection 5 of the proposed ordinance
Right,
says any condition imposed or proffer accepted prevails over the general provisions of this ordinance. So I think that's what Ms. Brumfield is getting at, is that they do work in tandem with one another, but I think the proposed ordinance spells out that they prevail over the general provisions of the ordinance and become sort of the partial specific zoning of the property if and when approved.
I understand the parcel specific. That's not what I'm arguing about. I'm arguing about whether or not at any point, someone would argue that a proffer supersedes the code, of which I don't believe it's got the ability to do, simply by what I read in section 3.4.3.e. I hate doing this. I really don't like doing that. And we can talk about this, where it says
No, I had to say-
all approved, and this is on page 10, all approved proffered conditions will apply in addition to all applicable zoning regulations. So it's apply in addition to, and not, as I said, on one, prevails over. There's a difference in term of art there, prevails over and in addition to, and I want us to opt for the in addition to and not the prevails over. Do you see? I know it's a nuanced thing, and I know you'd probably give me a B- for that on the exam, but I would really be pushing on that because I think there's a clarity there
Mhm.
that if I were a mischievous developer,
Mhm.
I would be looking to stretch as opposed to what the county says in that last bit is that it's saying, no, give me the phone. Should have kept my finger there. I always do that. Oh, that it's in addition to as opposed to prevails over. But I will just stop there and I'll let you all wrestle with that. I don't need an answer.
I think both statements are accurate, but we can certainly take a look at the specific wording that you're bringing up and make sure that it
don't-
is not only accurate, but as intended.
Right, and my whole thing is I don't want the county to lose its jurisdiction on things. And we do know that sometimes, not any developers on this, on the diocese, but there are sometimes developers who will try and stretch it and say, no, this is what it said it could do.
Mhm.
So I'm doing this.
I had actually, if I could piggyback off that, we're still in section Article 1, section 1.2.1, number 5. Conditions imposed or proffers accepted, says that a couple times. This is just a nit, but is it and or proffers accepted? I mean, you could have a situation where you have conditions imposed and proffers accepted,
Both.
right?
It's an and.
And or it means.
The conditions would be to a special use permit and the proffers would be to a zoning map amendment. So you have,
I see. So
again,
the
conditions
separate
with
one.
the special use permit and the proffers would be on a zoning map
So
amendment.
you wouldn't have conditions on a ZMA.
Hmm.
The conditions on the ZMA would be the proffers.
Yeah.
Another
got
word
it.
for proffers is conditional zoning.
Okay. Okay. And it's a little bit unclear, but I guess when you get in the process, it makes sense.
Makes more sense, yeah.
All right, Commissioners Moore or Murray, any detailed questions, comments?
Actually, I don't have ones that are details, but I do have, this is really a basic question that I'm sure the answer is yes. But just looking through with all the references to points in state code, I'm presuming in the final version, those will be actually linked out to state code. Great. And then this is another one where I don't know that it belongs necessarily here, but maybe a companion document of some sort. Just for like regular people who want to do a smaller scale project, like a granny cottage or duplex their home or whatever. Do we have anything on the county site, just like how to get started? And I see the diagrams are great, and I liked having that in color. But just wondering if we have something like really kind of like, hey, here's the first thing you do, and then this, and then, I mean, like, it's kind of here, but just sort of a brochure.
Sure, I think that would be a fantastic idea. I've seen that on other communities' websites. I think that is just just an internal user guide kind of project that we would fold into our website.
Yeah, that would be great.
And we do have some documents
Like,
downstairs in
Albemarle
the
County
division
just
lobby.
Build something.
Yeah.
We do have some documents downstairs in the division lobby about if you want to do this,
Hmm.
it's like a bifolder, or I don't know what that is. It's this kind of fold. And says if you want to do this, and you can do this. If you want to put a garage on, you got to do these things. If you want to do an addition to your home, you need to do these kinds of things. But it's a paper, Nathan. It's not it's not a thing that I've seen. I've seen the paper ones.
And on the website.
Yeah, but I've seen the paper ones. I've actually given the paper ones to some people.
Anything else? Commissioner Moore?
No, it's
Good. I just had a couple of things, bear with me here, just mostly questions, but I'm in Article 1, Section 1.15, conformity required. And I had my hat on. First of all, it's amazingly simplified and it's great. I just had is it too wordy? Glasses on, and it says, approval, all land, building structures and or premises within the county may be used, occupied, erected, constructed, moved, enlarged, and or altered in any conformance with this ordinance. For what it's worth, I'll just throw that out. Is that really all those words really necessary? Or
We can definitely look at that.
just a thought?
I would hazard a guess that that does come from Virginia code, but I am
Um,
not,
Others too.
Yeah,
I'm not certain on that. I do know that it comes almost directly from our current ordinance, that list. So, but we can review that again.
just a thought. And then we talked about number 5. So let's see. There's another reference to that, and I'm sorry, I'm just not, I'm sure it's right. I'm just not getting my head around this whole conditions proffers thing, but I understand what you said about that, but then in section division, or so division 1.3.1B, the zoning map also includes symbols that represent the existence of conditions, including proffers, attaching to the zoning of a parcel on the zoning map. I don't know, is that, I'm assuming that's accurate.
That's the conditional zoning. So a proffer is a type of condition as far as currently reflected in our zoning map. The only conditions that are shown are proffers other than voluntary voluntarily joining an agricultural forestal district, which is an additional condition.
Got it. Okay, okay. Section 1.3.3 talks about, and this maybe gets a little bit to what Commissioner Moore was talking about, which is lot lines on the zoning map that are intended to follow the lot lines and the center lines of streets or alleys as they existed on December 10th, 1980, and as amended. And where a district boundary obviously does not follow any lot line or center line and is not depicted on an approved subdivision plat or site plan or described by dimensions on other means, the district boundary must be determined by measurement using a scale. This seems so, I mean, I don't know, it just, again, this stuff just jumped out at me. It's really like a scale, like,
It does feel a bit antiquated.
Yeah.
In this ArcGIS world.
yeah,
But the maps on December 10, 1980 were
scale.
hand-drawn. So
So we haven't changed how we measure those. Okay,
we use our GIS primarily, but based on anything where it is a little bit iffy because computer pixels can only go down so far.
Yeah.
We do go to surveys, and the surveys are often measured by scale.
got it. Interesting. Okay. So now it's division 1.4, section 1.4.2 violations continue. Any violation of the previous zoning ordinance will continue to be a violation under this ordinance unless or until the subject use, structure, or sign complies with the express terms of this ordinance. Are those really the only 3 that potentially are subject to violations?
Yes, sorry, I had to
Okay.
think about that for a
Mhm.
second. A parcel cannot really be a violation. So those are really the,
Got it. Okay, that was it for that. And then I just had a couple of other, the rest of them are pretty straightforward. Bear with me. I had no comments on Article 2. That looked great. Article 3, some of these have been answered too. A lot of reference to RIO 29 form-based code. There's a waivers section, so I'm in section 3.1.4. C, community meeting C. 3, other relevant factors. So it's sort of a catch-all phrase. Waivers, the agent may waive an otherwise required community meeting if the agent determines that 1 and 2 are pretty specific, and then 3 other relevant factors based on sound planning and zoning principles would render a community meeting unnecessary. I'm just curious, does that open, is that maybe again, it's code, but does that open up a level of vagueness to the applicant? Like, well, I think it's based on sound planning and zoning principles.
They certainly may argue.
Okay.
Anyone may argue anything that's in the zoning ordinance. As described in Article 2, the zoning administrator administers the ordinance
Adjudicates
and
that.
they would make that determination.
Okay.
The specific type of example that we had when we were discussing this,
Yeah,
which is what is used today, is that for example, the adding a playground to a concept plan to an already approved special use permit, that is not something that necessarily needs a community meeting. It's not a change in use. It's not a change in impact.
right.
That would be the kind of situation when you would have to go through the approval steps to get the special use permit amendment approved. But it's not something that, based on sound principles, we need to waste staff time on.
Got it. Okay, it was the one statement that popped out as being kind of subjective, so that's.
Well, and if I may, I mean, there's been I'm not going to cite specific cases, but there's been a few times where we had a community meeting and it was like, wow, we didn't really need to have that because there was really, this is a nothing burger and no one was concerned. And a few cases where it turned out we should have had a community meeting because there was other issues that came up that we were not aware of.
Yeah.
So, it's a judgment call and errors will happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
that
have
makes
made
sense.
them.
And then this kind of goes off of Commissioner Firehawk's comments, I think, about the process diagrams, which I love. Where we'll just use the same one that was on the screen where you don't
Where
have
are
to
you,
pull it
Jay?
back
Where
up.
are you?
I am on section 3.3.3.
3.3.
Just curious, under staff there's no times included in there. Like, staff comments within 45 days, respond, and then going back and those types of things. How, and maybe this is in here and I just missed it, but as an applicant, how does the applicant determine timeline between staff reviews, staff comments being provided? And did you ever consider adding to a diagram those sort of goals or target timelines?
Sure. So that was something that we considered at the beginning, and it got very complicated very quickly.
Yeah.
Because each individual application, if we put a number on a simple diagram,
Yeah.
then that becomes what sticks in someone's mind.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is that, yes, it is 45 days for comments if you give us back your changes.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we get into
Okay.
trouble with
And there's nothing
applicants.
wrong.
And so that is within the text of the ordinance, that's
Yeah.
in the actual regulations.
Got it.
Very
And that would be something that would be communicated during the pre-application meeting process as well.
I got you. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So I guess I was thinking, for example, if the way these diagrams read, once I get staff comments, I revise the application, then I got to go back to the very beginning of the process again. And as an applicant, I would wonder, wait, isn't there a benefit that I'm already in the system that allows me to go more quickly through rather than just resubmitting at the very beginning of the stack?
So that might be something that might need clarification. Every time an applicant sends back a changed application, that is technically a resubmittal.
Mhm.
And it doesn't follow exactly the same process, but
Right.
it is officially a resubmittal as far as Virginia code goes for like starting timelines, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
The code was very specific, was just very when I read the code, it seemed very generous
Mm,
to the applicant, that every time the applicant went, oh, I need to add a semicolon. Well, guess what? You just got more time.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
You didn't say that unless you have, because one of my questions was like, what's a substantial violation or what's a
Yeah, yeah,
substantial change? If you tell me that there's no substantial change, then it should run. Unless there's a substantial change, then it should pause it. And then everybody would agree to a pausing and then it would run. Nah, you run, you get a pause and you come back and then you get some more time and you come
Yeah.
back and you get some more time.
Well, and we do also, just if I may, we get, that's another critique we hear from the public is, or a question at least, was why didn't they have to have another community meeting? The applicant had a community meeting and then made all these dramatic changes, which is,
Yeah.
the purpose, but then they wanted then
Sure.
the community's like, well, we need another community meeting because this application is really different.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
not to get into what I
Right.
actually do on a daily basis,
Yeah.
but we've had situations
Right.
like that where Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors requested changes in the site plan. Significant changes, like move the parking from the north side to the south side. And all of a sudden, we're impacting a different community.
Right.
But they never had the opportunity to weigh in on that. So that, yeah, that's a great point.
I don't know how to
Um,
fix it, but.
I had a couple questions back on the slides. It was Article 3, the certificate of occupancy piece, the default approval. If I heard you correctly on this first one where it says currently default approval after 60 days of ARB, blah, 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 that's going away.
Yes.
And so I get why from a staff standpoint. I assume that from an applicant standpoint, that doesn't really, I mean, just trying to think of what that looks like from their standpoint.
That's understandable. We don't have this being used currently.
Meaning that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but meaning that staff actually does respond within that 20, so it's basically not an issue.
Yes, it's essentially moot. It's a stick in the ordinance that has
Hmm.
never been used.
I see.
In,
Okay.
as far as current staff's living memory, so.
Got it. Okay. And then the withdrawal by application inaction. After 6 months, if it's, and that's an added one, right? That's new.
Yes, that is a new addition.
Okay. So I guess it's just something that the applicant has to be aware of, right? If they don't make action, if there's no activity, then it's essentially,
Do you
Yeah,
have
and
to
that's
define
something.
Activity,
I
though?
think you did. I said, I mean, I think
Did.
it's if
feel
the
like it's
applicant
well-defined.
didn't respond,
Okay,
I think there was something in here that staff will reach out. If the applicant doesn't respond
yeah.
in 6 months during the,
at
staff,
all, yeah.
yeah, then it's like,
Then
the
you-
binding
But if
Give-
they're
you've
saying
been
like, oh,
given a-
I need help with this, or whatever they
That's a
say.
Then that's a response.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which would pause the application, it would push us back. Because
Okay.
remember, we've had a number of, well, how do I put this? We've had a number of applicants that have come to us and that the project has laid fallow for years.
Yes,
Years.
correct.
And you even, I think someone even mentioned that when they started when the project got started, the traffic in that particular area was significantly different,
Yeah. Yeah.
which would probably required a
Big-
different kind of
Exactly.
entrance than, they're putting
Right.
in now. And
Well, we
so-
had that a lot with COVID traffic studies.
Right,
you
right,
know.
right, which we always.
Or,
push
or
for.
when UVA was closed and they
closed,
did the
that's right.
traffic study.
And so, or they didn't even respond, but at least they would respond and say, I can't do this. So I was pleased with this. And there was a couple of other places where I think you had, that I just said, thank you, but I didn't say anything. That was like, you're saying if they don't respond, then you got to go all the way back to,
Yeah. Square one.
square one. I was like, thank you.
So-
And just as a point of clarification, the EPNL system does, this will not come as a surprise to anyone that these 6 months are coming up, that they have comments that they need to address.
Yeah.
That is something that does make sure that they are aware of the comments that they have received. Whatever contact information they have provided, they will be getting notice that they have things that they need to address. So
Got
it
it.
isn't trying to pull one over on the applicant.
Right. right.
We are just trying to make sure that we keep things moving, and whatever we're approving is in line with what we are actually trying to do in the county today and
Yeah.
not 4 years ago.
Seems reasonable. And then my last comment is I actually gave these articles to our latest Rockstar intern, also known as RSI. And I asked her to look at it as if it were somebody just looking at this fresh, because I've stared at this for a lot of years. And her response was, I found this to be much easier to understand than the current zoning ordinance. So job well done. Thank you. Any other general comments, questions? All right. Anything else from us that you need?
I think we've got notes on the points of regulations unclear, and I think we will be able to bring this to the to the Board of Supervisors on, I believe, August 17th.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, I will move us to recess until 6 p.m. Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I will reconvene the June 25th meeting of the Albemarle County Planning Commission, and I will ask again to establish a quorum. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Bivens,
Here.
Ms. Firehawk. Here. Mr. Missile,
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I will reread this. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the hybrid meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website, on the Planning Commission homepage, and on the Albemarle County calendar. Participation will include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received. And with that, I will move on to other matters not listed on the agenda from the public and ask if there are any matters from the public not listed on tonight's agenda for input. Yes, ma'am, I do have one. Is it Janie Holbrook? Ms. Holbrook, welcome. And as a reminder, you will have, I think it's 3 minutes, am I right? And when the yellow light appears, you'll have 1 minute left.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Good evening, Janie Holbrook, Prose in Whitehall. I spoke to you in April about the demise of the Eastern Avenue connector to 250 in East Prose. And since then, I've learned about Project Heron, a clandestine public-private partnership between the county and Riverbend to extend Eastern Avenue. Riverbend is the developer of over 500 existing homes in the center of East Crozet and of the proposed Oak Bluff. I would love to be excited about the Project Heron news, but it sounds really just too good to be true. And in fact, it may have been tabled due to some legal and procedural issues. I have no doubt, however, that it will be resurrected in some new form to justify approval of maximum density at Oak Bluff. So why am I and most of my neighbors in East Crozet so suspicious? The plan is to build the road and a bridge at just 43% of last year's VDOT estimate. Yes, less than half. Plans were not approved by VDOT or FEMA. Environmental issues were not cleared. The term sheet had no provision for cost overruns, imposed no penalty for delays or failure to complete the project. It required no cash, bond, or other security from Riverbend, and it capped the county contribution at $17 million. In the past year, the Exit 107 park and ride cost increased 43%, and the 240 roundabout cost increased 32%. But somehow the $17 million for Project Heron will be sufficient for years to come. Something really doesn't smell right here. If I had taken this deal for approval when I worked in finance, I would have been fired. No one wants to be associated with a deal with so many holes and unmitigated risks and no known due diligence. For Project Heron and its successor, 100% of the risk is borne by the residents of Crozet East. And on this shaky foundation, you will be asked to approve of maximum density development, take green space from West Hall, Liberty Hall, and Quarry Farm, destroy half of the entrance to Westlake Hills, allow a new access road while an emergency-only road was approved for over twice as many homes at Granger, and ignore the already pressing safety and traffic concerns in the area. And what is gained from the Project Heron ruse? 6 units per acre instead of 4 units per acre. At lower density, almost all of the neighborhood issues can be addressed. And in the context of an existing 20 to 40% cushion in approved and pipeline units needed by 2040, is the secrecy and charade really worth it? The Crozet community has a lot of questions about Project Heron and its replacement. And I really hope that you will ask those questions too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Holbrook. Could we be sure that we get a copy of that too? Because that was a lot of good information, but I didn't absorb that.
Yes.
If you'll just email it to me, the
Clerk,
clerk, yes, for the planning commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
are there any other comments from the public? Not about items listed on the agenda? All right, well, with that, I will move on to the consent agenda, and there is nothing on that, so we don't have to make a motion there. We'll move right into the public hearings, beginning with SP 2024-11, the gray. Could I have the staff report, please? We have the staff.
Hold on.
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce myself while we're waiting for the screen. I'm Rebecca Ragsdale, Planning Manager with the Planning Division, and I'll be presenting the 2 public hearing items this evening.
Having trouble getting there. Gotcha.
you. So this is a special use permit for a restaurant within an existing commercial structure of about 2,100 square feet. So I'll go over its location and then summarize our the proposal and our findings. I think everyone's pretty familiar with this site. It is at the triangle, if you will, of 250 and Louisa Road. The building is developed with the American Legion, and then I mentioned the existing building space, and the surrounding properties are a mix of non-residential uses, which are with the religious assembly, another gas station, convenience store, Clifton Inn nearby, Stone Robinson and Luckstone. This is just another view of the site and the existing parking. There are no site changes proposed, and the existing parking and entrance were found to be adequate for the addition of food service, a restaurant within an existing wine and specialty shop. I should have mentioned that earlier. Just for context, this is a C1 zone parcel next to another C1 zone parcel, and then of course surrounded by a rural area and natural resource across the road at Luckstone. There are certain uses that require SPs. And in this case, restaurants are specifically required to, if not served by public water, get a special use permit. Now, water is not the only factor that we considered when we reviewed this. It's subject to all of the usual special use permit criteria. Given the size and scale of this use, no change in the existing buildings or parking. We didn't have any concerns. We are aware that, C1 is not consistent with the comp plan, but there were no negative impacts to some of our other goals in the comp plan. And we have recommended approval with one condition that limits the gross floor area of the restaurant. I did want to mention that while the proposal, there's a certain business plan with the proposal right now, but we are comfortable, given the size of and the information that was provided in terms of water usage, that 2,100 square feet of a restaurant that may have more food service, or if there was more food service added in the future, we were comfortable with just the one condition. They didn't limit it further. So I'll just pause for any questions you may ask.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions from the commission? No questions from the commission? All right, well, with that, I will open the public hearing and call for the applicant. Does the applicant have any comments or presentation?
Hello,
Hello.
I just wanted to.
Sorry,
introduce-
please state your name and
Oh.
general location of residence, please.
Okay, my name is Noelle Gray and I live in Keswick, 868 Campbell Road.
I
Keswick,
need you to
Virginia.
talk right into the microphone. I should live.
Yeah, it's hard to hear it.
Move it, yeah. There you go.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Sorry. My first time, I apologize.
That's okay. Try the name again and
Okay.
sorry that all.
My name is Noelle Gray and
Thank
I
you.
live in Keswick, Virginia, 868 Campbell Road.
Great, thank
So,
you.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. I have a little wine and retail shop and I was hoping to add some limited food service. Nothing crazy, meat and cheese boards. Basically something so that I can do more extended tastings, both beer and wine. I'm a big believer in agro-tourism, and the area I'm located in is right in the heart of Monticello. I have a lot of good friends that are local brewers and local winemakers, mead makers, and cider makers, and I would love to be able to promote industry and, all good things. So I don't think I'm in any conflict with existing businesses as far as I kind of fill a niche that isn't fast food to go or really high-end dining cuisine. It's just simple fare, simple, local meats, cheeses that pair well with wine, beer, mead and cider. So nothing crazy.
Great.
Do you have any questions? for
That was
me?
my next question.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? Yes.
So thanks. I read your application. It's very good, very well prepared. I guess, so you're talking about, retail customers, but are you also going to have like classes as well? Like
Yeah.
learn to pair or
Exactly.
how to know what wine goes with what cheese or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. So my background's actually fermentation science. I teach commercial craft brewing at Piedmont,
Hmm.
Virginia Community College. And so not just wine, but also beer, all good fermented things. But yes, education is a big part of what I plan on doing. And by being able to serve food, that'll allow me to do more extensive tastings, more comprehensive tastings that actually can continue and really, like, let's say you wanted to get the gist of Rioja or some region. You can't really do that with a gourmet license. You need to be able to taste a little bit more. So, and then do extended classes. So yeah, I will absolutely be focusing on education.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great.
So if I could just drill down just a tiny bit. So are you moving the Elliewood Avenue function there, or are you gonna have two functions?
Nope, I have currently two
You
shops.
Currently have two
Mhm.
functions, okay. And then in your application where you talk about simple food that pairs well with wine and beer, and then in the next paragraph, it talks to, you speak to, as you just mentioned, the increased flexibility would allow me to focus on promoting wine and beer education. So if I understand that, you're not looking, oh, here it is. So you're not looking to have a full kitchen. So you're not going to be, it's not a sit-down dining kind of establishment.
There is,
I'm asking, that's a
yeah,
question.
there is, so you have to have in-person dining and consumption of food for ABC regulation. So yes, there will be meat and cheese boards, toasted sandwiches. It will be a limited kitchen. I don't have a hood vent and I don't plan on putting a hood vent in.
You don't plan on having, okay.
I don't
okay.
know. I don't, when you do that, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm fine. I was just trying to
Oh,
figure
yeah.
out so to give a sense to the people who may be listening to this, it's not like you're looking to create a sit-down restaurant where people, where people would come in and they'd order sort of, the plat du jour or something. like
Right,
that.
right. We won't have like 3-course meals, things like that. Small plate fare, basically.
But there
Um,
will be sit down, right? You'll have
Yes,
tables and
it will be
chairs.
sit
I
down.
just see the table.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
gotcha.
And I don't have to have kombucha.
Right. So a related question, you have outdoor seating shown on your plan as well?
Yeah,
That's the
it's,
intent.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's
Okay, got it.
So,
Bounce back?
yeah, I have a bounce back if I could. So I noticed that there was in your next door neighbor, which is the Legion, I assume it's the Legion, they had a line across the parking lot that said, basically, don't come over here, don't go out this way.
yeah,
And was hoping that was because of them and not because of you.
it is. It's actually a lot to deter tractor trailers from going through there. Because everybody uses that parking lot and it takes a lot of abuse. So, yeah.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I will now open it up to comments from the public on this item. Are there any comments from the public? Few smiles, that's it. All right, that's great.
None of
Um,
them either.
Nobody online?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I will then close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any comments, questions, concerns, or motions?
So just the one thing I'll say is that a while back, we talked about these sort of legacy commercial areas within the rural area. And one of the comments that I'd made that I think I don't know was well received by some of you, but was the idea that we should strive for some of these commercial areas to bring them to better compliance with the spirit of the comprehensive plan. When I said that, I think that this is actually a pretty good example of something that I think is in the spirit of the comprehensive plan. Here's something that is supporting local agriculture, supporting local food, and I think is an excellent example of what I think should be a by right activity in the rural area. For something that's, supporting, this is supporting supporting local food and agriculture. So leave it at that.
Thank you.
Similarly, I think it actually makes a lot of sense to have food available when you're serving alcohol. So that's my comment on that.
Awesome. Any other closing comments, questions?
I have studied the viticultural regions of the United States. And I would say there are other places I visited where you can have, they have food pairings and it's the normal thing. And you can actually appreciate the wine tastes completely different depending on the pairing. If you're just tasting wine with no food, like most of the wineries here, you don't get that, that palate understanding of what you're doing. So it is a nice thing, but I guess I will just say that I am in support of this just because so far, because it's very low impact. It's in an existing building. They're not planning to impact anyone. They're not, I just don't see what the problem would be with the use within the building. And then as Lonnie said, it is supporting our industries here, which, beer, wine, mead, all of that.
It almost feels like a staff review level, except that the water, like if the water well capacity is sufficient, then.
Right, but they did a great job on that study and it was
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very minor
Yeah, as
impact.
I was looking at that water use and actually it's, if you looked at like the average family of 5 or something, 3 or 4, whatever it is, they'd be using way more water than they're using for this use. So it's,
Right, because it's not a full service kitchen. They're not going to be generating a lot of dishes and things.
no.
Anyway.
Mr. Bivens? you have
I also am in support of this because I like the fact that it diversifies the food, the sort of food, that's not the right word I want to say. The meal opportunities in that area. So right in front of it, you've got sort of your typical, although it's good food, because from I think it's the same owners from the Crozet Whitehall area. So you've got Legacy Market. And then around the corner, we can go truly upscale if we want to go to Clifton. And then, there, I think it's a nice, and then we could go the other way and go to Keswick Hall. So I think that's really a nice option for that area for food. So I think and I don't have to have kombucha, so I'm really happy.
Thank you. I agree with what everybody said, and I'm in support of this as well. I guess I just had one general comment, not necessarily related to this application, but related to water consumption and wells. I just remember, a couple of years ago, maybe we talked about the county looking at aquifer capacities and if there's a way to study those or not, as in a general sense, because these all kind of come in as one-offs and they look great on their own, but combined with a lot of others, we should maybe have a handle on that, like we do with public water and sewer, if there's a way.
The thing that I might offer to us there as an observation, Chair, is that all the surrounding activities there are none of them are constant. So you have across the street, I think the church meets Sundays and Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And then I think the American Legion is like, they have bingo on Sunday and maybe they do something on Saturday. And so I think what you have there is you may have some uses, but
Yeah.
it's not like where we were looking. I think we were looking at the other thing that you were talking about was on Black Cat Road.
Yeah.
Where they were going to put sort of like
Exactly.
a gas station there.
Yeah.
The gas station was going to be 24 hours and it's going to, and so the question was, will this impact the communities which are there? And I think there'd been some nervousness about the aquifer on both sides of 66 or 64? On both sides of 64. And so I think that was a different kind of conversation than I think what we're being led to think about here on that piece, on that triangle. Plus,
Yeah.
I think there's a capacity issue. She only has so many, I think it's a capacity and a time issue. I don't think the time on the door, so they closed at 6 o'clock, which I was a little sort of annoyed by because I was hoping to buy something when I went out there, but it was closed by the time I got there. So hopefully this will give them the opportunity to stay open a little later.
The other thing I'll mention, and as we're thinking about the rural areas, right, that when these types of developments, and I agree there could be by right, I mean, essentially if they have meet a certain criteria, but that they come with a understanding of what the aquifer, what the water is like in that area as well.
Oh, yeah. And don't forget septic as well. And
Yeah.
I do have a question for staff about this. When we have something like this, I assume the Department of Health also has to do an inspection and make sure that the septic system is functioning.
Yes, the health department was part of the review team for this one.
Okay.
Which is
And
the
they-
septic, which they review septic.
They have to
Yeah.
get the permit from Department of Health.
And also, they will come, they have established a retail store now. They will come back through our process if the special use permit is approved. And I believe she may already have her license with the health department. So they're part of the process with special use permit. They're part of the process with building permits. They're part of the process with zoning clearances, which is the last thing before a business can be established.
Yeah, I assume that. I didn't know for pre-existing buildings like this, what the procedure was. So thank you for clarifying that. But yeah, I've thought too with the water usage, I think a good metric that staff could potentially use that I've advocated for a while is to think about
I'm
just that, about what would be the average water use if a family was living there? How many people could have lived there by right and how much water would that be?
Mhm.
And that's a good metric to look and compare to get a rational feeling about whether it's too much or too much water that's being used on the site and may require additional review. Just the overall lens too about, is this in the spirit of the comprehensive plan, supporting the rural area, natural resources and local agriculture? And this is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is in my district, so I'm happy to make a motion. I move to recommend approval of SP 2024-11, The Gray Restaurant, with the single condition outlined in the staff report.
Second.
Discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, can we have the roll, please?
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye,
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
thank you all. All right. Find my agenda here. All right, with that, I will move on to SP 2024-8 Crown Orchard Solar and ask for the staff report.
Hello, it's Rebecca Ragsdale again, Planning Manager with the Planning Division, and I will also take you through this item. This is a proposed 1.5 acre solar facility at a much larger existing orchard operation, part of Crown Orchard's overall operations and properties. Because the definition of a solar facility defines it as one that's over a 1/2 acre, even though it's not going to be utility scale and is solely supporting the orchard, the special use permit is still required. So it is located at the very end of Crown Orchard Road, in off Plank Road's Craig Store area of the county. And the solar panels will be tucked on the hillside near the cold storage and other orchard operations and accessed by existing farm orchard access. So when we looked at it, we looked at the topography and the limited area that they would be occupying and didn't have any concerns with visibility. And it has been reviewed by our rural area planners and engineering and our usual project team for any concerns related to impacts to adjacent properties or consistency with the comprehensive plan. Obviously, it's supporting an orchard operation, but making sure we considered all of the other portions of the plan. We did acknowledge it is in the mountain overlay protection area, but based on how it's cited in the limited area, we didn't have any concerns about impacts to that. So we are recommending approval of this one, and it has a number of conditions. I don't want to go through each one, but they are the package of conditions, if you will, that you typically see for a solar facility adapted to this concept plan, this particular site. But that does include development in general accord with the plan, the increased setbacks, protection of the wooded areas, the provision for decommissioning, and then again, the standard conditions that we've added regarding the site and training for fire rescue and all of those typical things. So I know that was pretty brief, but happy to go back to any other slides and answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So we're approving that, we would be approving, if we approved it, the use of the solar at the location. And you had the general location. Is there anything in the conditions or in the application that specifies that the number of panels are restricted? So, I mean, would it be possible for the solar arrays to spread all across and go outside of that little cluster that we see?
No, they need to hold to the cluster, and that's one of the conditions.
Okay, so they
Generally
can't
speaking.
like say double the size of the solar
No.
or? Okay, I just wanted to be clear because I thought it was just saying the location, but not necessarily the extent.
Good question.
And we'll make sure that that is covered if it's not, it's.
I didn't pick it apart with a fine tooth comb, so it could be in there.
It's the look, excuse me, I'm trying to talk too fast.
Sorry.
It's the condition 1A, location of the solar development envelope, and reference to that plan that regulates that.
Yeah, I saw that as the location rather than the extent of the envelope.
Scope.
So when we're talking about the solar development envelope, maybe, I think I did pull that from another condition. Maybe we will label that plan and update it. So when the board acts on it, it's very
Maybe
clear.
you could say the location and extent.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it
think
talks,
that would be
I think the
clearer.
extent does it. The
Yeah.
extent does it.
yep, talks about the number, like on the plan, it has the number of modules, right? So I
Right.
guess that's,
Does.
but, yeah. Any other questions for staff?
Mm.
All right. Was thinking I had a question, but I guess I don't. Thank you. So with that, I'll open the public hearing and call for the applicant. If you have a report, I'd love to hear it. Thank you. And as a reminder, state your name and general location of residence. Thanks.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Andrew Jenner. I live in Harrisonburg. I'm the branch manager of Paradise Energy Solutions. So we're the contractor here. I'm on behalf of, speaking on behalf of the applicant, which is Crown Orchard Company. So we're the solar company that is proposing to build this for Crown Orchard. Do you have the brief slideshow that I sent earlier? I also
Can't
have
do
it on
it from
USB
mine.
here.
Pardon?
I don't have, she sent it to us, but I can't do it for mine.
Oh, did you upload it?
I didn't. I can't, yeah.
Okay. You brought the
I have it
memory.
here
sti-
too. Yeah,
Okay,
USB
I'm
as
sorry. I
well.
thought that was already taken care of.
Okay.
Thank you.
You may already know this, but just as a reminder, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Not counting the presentation.
Yeah.
But is it like when we were talking this afternoon, if there's a delay, the
Yeah.
10 minutes keeps extending?
It does. Right now, he's not on his clock.
Oh, he's not on the clock right
No.
now? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so does this appear for you in front of your screens? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got you. Thank you.
Just very briefly, I mean, I imagine you've seen all the materials that that was part of our special use permit application. That has all the electrical drawings, I think a project narrative and all sorts of other things. This is just a quick overview. It's 491 kilowatts and it's to offset the usage of 16 meters at Crown Orchard Company. As it relates to the question about expansion of the array in the future, one of the limiting factors here is that it's essentially net metering. It's not utility scale solar, so the size of the array is limited by what the utility will allow. It's not a power plant just feeding solar onto the grid, which is more typical where you could theoretically want to come back and do more later. So this usage right here is as large as the utility would allow in this certain circumstance based on the usage on these meters that are owned by Crown Orchard Company. So yeah, it's good being installed next to an existing cold storage facility. Yeah, quite a large property, and we're talking about covering about 1.5 acres is the total area. That's essentially just solar panels and the steel structure to hold them. quite low to the ground. I'm sure you've seen them all before, you know, not very tall. The tallest thing will be a new utility pole. And once it's built, it sits there, no noise, dust, problems, traffic. So, you know, environmental benefits are one of the major things. It's produced quite a bit of renewable electricity in coming decades. And again, the point's been made in the staff report. Also in our narrative, we tried to highlight that there's several goals of the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan that we feel like are supported by this project. So our company, just very briefly, we're a turnkey solar PV company. We do a lot of commercial and resident agricultural work, a little bit of residential. Founded about 15 years ago in Pennsylvania. Our branch has been in Virginia, out of Harrisonburg since 2017. So we've done a few projects here in Albemarle County. None of them have been big enough, though, to bring us here in front of you tonight. This was the most recent one, actually. This is Spring Valley Orchard, which is also owned by Crown Orchard Company. It's another apple orchard. It's a little bit it's near Nelson County, further southwest. This actually just turned on earlier this month. We built it in the spring, and this is about a third of the size, but it just included this picture here to show it's fairly modest, just to support agricultural operations there. This is another one here, actually, for the same customer. We've been doing a lot for the Crown Orchard Company. This is down in Campbell County at another orchard they have. That's, again, what we're talking about doing is about 3 times the size of that. So it's a little bit bigger, but it's by modern standards of you know, large scale solar. It's fairly modest in size. So happy to answer any questions you have about the project, if you have any for me.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the commission?
I have a few if I could.
Yes, please.
So thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your focus on providing solutions for agribusinesses. So on this one here that you brought before us, and you said that there's just like a third and then a third larger and then 2/3 larger than the first one. Is this just for the orchard, or will it be feeding some of the homes or the dwellings which are adjacent to the orchard?
Are you talking about the current proposal?
The current proposal.
Yeah. So I'll try not to get too technical.
That's okay. You can get as technical.
Okay.
We all are smart here in Albemarle County.
It is sized to offset 16 meters that are all owned by Crown Orchard Company on this house. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure what they all are. There's several residences that are there.
So it's both commercial, it could potentially be both commercial and residential.
It could be. It could be. Yeah. It's honestly, it's a fairly unusual arrangement with as far as the way that this works. Typically, what we do is net metering, that you can only be behind 1 meter and offset the usage of that 1 meter. Sometimes there's meter aggregation in certain circumstances, certain utilities will allow. This is not technically meter aggregation, but it's behaving the same way. So we will be interconnected at one new electrical service, but will be the size of the array and the production that we're projecting is based on 16 total meters that are all owned by Crown Orchard and are all sort of contiguous there. So I don't know what the nature of all those 16 is. So it could be that some of them are like farm worker housing. They have a lot of that.
They have a lot of that there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, before you go to the supervisors, I would just suggest that you know whether or not it's both commercial and residential,
Okay.
because they're even smarter than us.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
That's just a comment. I actually used to live near there, within walking distance, for many years. That road there, Burnt Mountain Road, is used highly by runners and cyclists. So just as your trucks are coming in and out of there, just make sure that they go slow and they watch out for pedestrians. And people take speed limits very seriously in Batesville. So as you're going through there, just let people know. That's my only comment.
I'm often on the running and cycling end. I appreciate the comment. Take it seriously. Thank you.
I had a question just about view sheds. Have you guys thought about view sheds into this area and what they might?
Yes, that was a question that staff raised early on, and I believe Rebecca met my colleague Jared there at one point to look, take a closer look at that in person. The nature, the way the topography, the road is coming south into the property, and this is on a south-facing slope.
Got it.
So it really is quite hidden. It would be hard to see until you're right up on it, right
Hmm.
at the dead end of the road there, the public road that ends at the cold storage facility.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And Chair, if you had a topography map, you and Commissioner Curzano are very good at that. There really is a change in topography there. So where you come in on the road,
Yeah.
you're significantly below
Lower,
the,
yeah.
the sort of the terrain where I
Got it.
believe, according to the map, where I believe these are going to be.
Good to know. Great. All right. No more questions from the commission. Yes, one more?
I just wanted to go back to my earlier question. So you gave us a somewhat technical answer earlier about how you were already, if I understood it, at the maximum that you could be in terms of the number of solar arrays that would you put on that site for that use. But I just guess I didn't understand. Are you saying you cannot? It sounded like a bunch of guidelines or rules, but those could be changed. I mean, could those change in the future, and then you would be able to expand the amount of solar?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, never say never. These regulations are based on what the State Corporation Commission and the legislature either allows or requires. And so as of,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that so those rules, is that by what the uses that they're serving or
Yes.
the size of the facility? I don't know how those are set.
It's based on usage. So if you, in a rural co-op, you're allowed to size at 100% of the past 12 months usage. So if you use 100,000 kilowatt hours, you can build an array that will produce up to 100,000 kilowatt hours. In Dominion and Appalachian Power Territory, it's up to 150% of that 1 meter, and then meter aggregation can change that a little bit more. So there's nuances to it, but it's based on how much electricity you use.
Okay.
And in
so-
this case, it's the total of those 16 meters that we're talking
So
about.
it's designed, those regulations are designed to right size the project
That's
for
a way
the
to-
use
that's
that
a way to
it's
look at it.
serving.
Yeah.
So that, okay. All right. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And then in terms of, I guess I would say in terms of size of the array, which correlates directly to amount of production. If there's a condition in there that would limit us to what we've proposed now, then I guess if the owner in the future, either the usage increased or there was some sort of policy change that would allow them to put more production there and they wanted to, I suppose that would require a new special use permit or an amendment to this one or something like that. So they'd have to come back and ask for that.
That's correct.
Great answer. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right. With that, I will thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
And I'll call for comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public? All right. Seeing none. Are there any online? Carolyn?
Nope, I have no one online.
No one online. All right. That sounds great. Well, with that, then I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion and or a motion. But I start at this end.
There's no.
Commissioner Moore.
No.
It makes sense to have off-grid power. It is probably prone to outages from our electrical suppliers. So having a way to continue doing that with something other than, gas generators makes a lot of sense to me. And again, it's another way to convert the sun into energy that people consume, like fruit.
Mr. Murray?
Although I will say the cooperative is way more reliable than Dominion.
Oh, good. My bad. I didn't
Oh,
realize.
but,
No
I
aspersion.
will second that.
But
So what did you?
The Central Virginia Co-op Electrical.
Oh.
yeah, it's way more-
They've done a
Very
lot of
reliable.
work to upgrade their lines and how they move their power around. So.
Then I
they'll add
rescind the
several
previous
years in
comment. I
upcoming.
was throwing shade at Dominion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, just one tiny thing for staff. I would appreciate that when we get things like this, that we had the stream buffers delineated. These solar panels are not in the stream buffer, but there's a stream buffer very close to this. It would have been nice to have those on our maps.
Got it. Thank you.
Because
Yeah, I don't know that I provided one in the packet. We're always trying to balance, that's good feedback. We'll
But
keep that in
particularly in
mind
the rural
future.
area where, stream buffers are important, it'd be nice to just show where those are.
So-
Yes, we do have other plans that they provided, and of course, we looked at that.
But in general, I think that this is a good example of, there's a huge difference between solar that's meant to support agriculture versus agricultural as a secondary use. Where someone may maybe toss some sheep out there or some goats and,
Yeah.
so this is something I think could very easily be something that's by right, that doesn't have to come before us, because it's small scale. And its overall purpose is to support agriculture, not the other way around.
Non-industrial.
Yeah, as long as it's not industrial. As I said, industrial would be for the sake of the industry, not for the sake of agriculture.
Any other comments?
I mean, I think it's a great example of where solar is appropriate in the rural area because it's providing it's supporting our agricultural uses being even more sustainable, right? They need power to do what they do and they're generating it locally, so they're reducing their footprint. So I mean, I think it's a great project and it also is not impactful to neighbors, fortunately. So that's why I don't think we have anyone coming up to comment this evening. We do certainly have quite a cadre of people who are concerned about our solar policy and the fact that it's still under development and isn't done yet. So, but I think this is a very straightforward application that's directly supporting the use that's there. So I'm in support of it.
I'm in support of it too, but I'm also for this moment, I'm glad that it came before us because I think the owners of Crown Orchard, the Childs family should be commended because I think if we look at most of their orchards in our neighborhood and sort of certainly down 29 and perhaps up on the mountain, they have been one of the few industries, particularly ag industries, to try and have an active solar solution on their properties. And so for them coming before us, I want to just raise them as an example of an ag business that's trying to sort of balance the need for increased energy with a solution that is actually sort of ecologically viable and a benefit to us. So that's why in this particular instance, I'm glad that they're here so that I can commend you for the work that you're doing at your other properties in our county and how you're installing solar solutions there.
Great, thank you. And I echo that as well. And the only thing that I'll mention is, first of all, I am really excited about the new solar ordinance. I think that'll be wonderful. I also would caution the fact that, even with this, which is a totally appropriate, and I'm fully supportive of this, if you had 100 of these, then you're starting to think about the visual and impacts and other impacts that we know about that we've discussed. So just keeping that in mind, it's not applicable here, but if it were this times 100 over the next 2 years, it may be a different issue. So with that, would anybody like to make a motion?
I would, since it's in my district. I move to recommend approval of SB 20244, many zeros 8 Crown Orchard Solar for the reasons stated in the staff report and with the staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Awesome. Any discussion?
I'll just note that I took to heart the applicant's clarification of how this extent was
Oh, yeah.
determined, and
Yeah.
that is why I did not add extent into my motion.
Great. Madam Clerk, can we have the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Moore.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all. All right, with that, we will move on to committee reports. Are there any updates from any of the commissioners?
Sure, I have a committee report. So the Creze CCAC met. We had a report from the Albemarle County Police Department going over crime statistics. It was very fascinating. I mean, it deviated off course a little bit, but one of the things that got extensive discussion was just how many crimes were caused by the same people they keep arresting over and over again. But because they can't keep them in jail, basically. They just keep getting let out, and so they're just, they're the same people. So that was a really interesting, create some really interesting discussions about, what do we as a community do about that to keep people from keep committing the same crimes over and over again. So I don't have any answers for that, but it was an
Community
interesting discussion.
Stocks.
Great, thanks. Which CAC was that? Was that Crozet?
It's crazy.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Any other committee reports?
Sure.
Yes.
So the Fifth and Avon CIC met, and the bulk of the meeting was to hear a presentation by the Water and Sewer Authority to talk about their excellent stewardship of our resources. We also got to see some really scary images of our original dam at Ragged Mountain that was insufficient. And so it was a combination of technical information about our water supply and our waste treatment, and then interesting origin stories about how we came to do such a great job. They also talked about PFAs, also known as forever chemicals, that now are being required to be reported by water treatment authorities. And we were sort of congratulated by the staff presenting that our community came together long ago. And I remember this, 'cause I've lived here for a very long time. And we demanded that we have activated carbon filtration. And so it turns out that in treating the forever chemicals, that's really the system that you need to have. And so other communities who did not go what is actually the more expensive route, as we did, are struggling to actually meet that treatment rule. Fortunately, we don't have any real I shouldn't say real, we do not have PFAs showing up in our water. But it was really nice to know that all the money and time that we spent on this has paid off with the health threat that is looming on the horizon. So then the second thing is the Historic Preservation Committee did meet.
Nicely done.
Yes, and we talked about, we've kind of delayed on the comprehensive plan work because there's just an overarching slowdown in terms of staff getting organized with the actions and trying to get that sorted before sort of basic subcommittees like the Historic Preservation Committee wrestle with things. So they kind of paused that, but instead we're working on a few things. One is there is money in the county budget for one more historic marker currently. And so we're looking at what would that historic marker be and where would it go? I don't want to get into the details of that because we didn't really decide the topic yet. So anyway, and we are hoping to have, as I mentioned last time, a more robust historic marker program where there's a clear process where you could suggest you want a marker, the community group could come forward and say why they wanted it, and we would then have a process for vetting it. But that is being held, that bigger program, until we have the comprehensive plan goals established. And then the other thing we talked about was more educational materials on our website. A lot of the materials on the county's website are more in the form of like long manuals and reports, and that a lot of people don't digest their information by reading dozens or hundreds of pages of reports. So that, trying to have more like rolling slideshows, and also trying to have different topics that people can learn about the historic resources. We also, I think, mentioned last time, we want to have an award program for people who do a great job at preserving historic resources, and not just plantation houses, but the everyday historic resources also. So again, that's something we have to wait for the comp plan to finish its process, but I think that there's a lot of ways to highlight the good things people are doing, because sometimes it feels like it's just a parade of lost places.
Yeah.
And then it's just depressing, but we actually are doing some great work in renovating and bringing back resources and telling stories that haven't been told. So somehow we're within the confines of the county's website. We're going to get some slide decks up there and rolling pictures and try to make it a little more interactive for, I will call it, the modern consumer of
If you want
media.
podcast to go with those slide decks.
Sure, why not? Yeah. Anyway, so that'll be fun. We're going to start working on that.
Great update. Any other committee updates? No. All right, with that, I will move on to the review of the Board of Supervisors meeting. Mr. Barnes?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Board of Supervisors met on June 12th. They received a presentation of a final draft for the Broadway Blueprint project, which incorporated your all's comments. And I think that staff's going to tweak it one more time, and then it'll go on their consent agenda for approval. Board also had a quick presentation on the current status of the smart scale projects that are wrapping up. Those applications will be submitted to the end of July. For the public hearing, they heard one that you might find of interest. I'll bring it up, that the electric charging stations that are outside the building here, they're going to be charging fees for those now.
Saw that.
Still reasonable compared to other ones you'll find in town. But it was just interesting they moved in that direction. The other item that went to the board on the 12th was Ravenna Futures rezoning a special use permit, which also was unanimously passed.
Great, thank you.
Yes. May I ask Mr. Barnes a question?
Of course.
Could you just open up a little bit more what the supervisor said about Broadway?
Well, I mean, I think Broadway is still this idea that it's an industrial area. And I think you're sort of dealing with some of the pressures of the real estate market around it to try and push in that direction. So there was some discussion about some of the residential zoning. It's kind of like the old houses that are up by the tracks and are down behind the woolen mills. Letting those become residential because there's an industrial now. So that would be one sort of a change kind of a thing. And then the other aspect, definitely was the idea of trying to maintain some of the commercial along the street. Two other things I'd bring up. There's one is the interface with the city and how to best do that. Primarily, it's along Franklin Street. And if you can picture that, when you're on Franklin, there's a really pretty big bluff that goes up.
Yes.
So it was discussion about how to do that, but I don't think that was the real
Yeah.
meat of what we were talking about. The last thing I would say is the service authority is actually replacing sewer line along the street there. And as part of their policy, when they're doing major work like that, they resurface the road. And that's going to afford us an opportunity to stripe the road to provide not a full-on pedestrian facilities on the other side, but at least demarcate the travel lanes and sort of give a little bit more room for that as well as some of the parking that sort of happens in that area. So I think broadly, there were not an extensive amount of comments on the board on it.
Great, good summary. All right, with that, AC 44 update.
So
Right back.
I promise you guys, we have the PowerPoint presentation is almost finished. I will be bringing it to you. I know, very exciting, after much delayed, at our first meeting in July, which is, I believe, it's the 9th. I sort of told you about the three parts that we're trying to work for, so I don't really have that much more to update you with.
Is that session just like here's where we're at? Or are you doing an active work session?
It's more, here's where we're at, and
Okay,
sort of
I
explaining the
missed that
format.
meeting, so I'm actually glad for your answer. So I
Yeah.
can just get your PowerPoint later.
Yeah, well, you'll get it that.
Yeah, our intent is to sort of like put together a really good draft based on the outline that we're going to present to you at our next meeting, and then we'll come back with a really pretty good solid first draft of the document, and then work our way through it. That way you have a little bit more context as the sections that you won't be quite reviewing at that individual meeting, you'll get a chance to sort of see where we're at it with those.
Great, thank you. With that, any new business? For old business, just one thing, and maybe this is under items for follow-up. I think we've exhausted our fancy little look-ahead schedule. So we have May and June. I assume we'll get a new one of those for July and August. That would be great. Thank you. Any other items before we adjourn? All right, with that, I will adjourn Planning Commission until the next meeting, which is Tuesday, July 9th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody.